Hi, my name's Kirsty Page, and in this short recording, we're going to explore the skills that underpin the language base of writing that children need. I think the link between talk and writing is fully accepted, and kind of is well and truly out there. You don't need me to tell you about that. But I do want to kind of use this recording as a way of really explaining how the language centers of the brain that we use for thinking and talking are exactly the same parts of the brain that we use to write things down. So the link between language and writing is much deeper than just if we give children time to talk it through, or if they're allowed to do story maps or to talk their stories through first, we'll get better writing. You know, that will be the case. But that actually, when we're thinking about having a systematic approach to underpin writing, and when we're also looking at gaps that might be acting as barriers to writing readiness and writing progression, that we actually look at the detail of language and we facilitate and build the detail of language. And when we're looking for gaps, we look for gaps within spoken language, we look for gaps within children's understanding of what people are saying to them. We don't just look for gaps within the writing. And just kind of it popped into my memory at the start of recording this video. I haven't thought about this in a long time. I remember when I did my teacher training, I was working in a year 2 class, and there were a certain quite large group of children who were finding writing more problematic than some of the other children. And what was quite interesting, even back then when kind of technology wasn't as big a thing, we had a story structure, and we got the children to think about what their characters were going to be, and we had lots of chances to talk it through and to draw pictures and to kind of do a storyline to support the structure and the sequence of the stories. What was interesting for those group of children who found writing more problematic is I actually gave them the opportunity to record their story. And back in those days, it was all about levelling children's work. And what was quite interesting was for some of those children, the level of their verbal story was significantly higher than the level of the story that they would end up writing down. And so what we see is we see a child with a stronger language base, but who pares back and brings down what they are going to say because they find writing problematic. It's very effortful. But for some of the children, the level of the story, or if I were to write it down and then level what they had said, it was a tiny bit higher than what they would get when they did write it down, but not massively higher. And so what we're looking at for different children is that language base of writing is obviously full of gaps, and I need to explore and find out what they are, and to realise that the solution for those children is not just to do more and more writing, it's about building language skill. Now, of course, I can support and work on that with children in year 2 and beyond. Of course, I can. But the ultimate strategy is to think about language and to see my focus on language in the early years as not just feeding into language and communication in the early years, but it's about paving that way for literacy and wide holistic literacy success in Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and beyond. So we're not going to do a detailed exploration of all of the language skills because that would take an extremely long time. But what I want to do is to just kind of pull out the main ones. The most obvious one that we find is that people go straight to thinking about levels of talk, and generally we do find that children who have strong sentence structure, you know, where we're linking the right number of words together for their age, we've got that grammatical structure evolving or established, and also the use of vocabulary within those sentences. Generally, we find that if children are strong talkers, then that correlates with strong language across the board, and that will feed into and increase the likelihood that that child will be a better writer. But we have to just be careful that children actually do have the strength of talk that we're thinking about, and we need to just be really careful, particularly when considering vocabulary use. How many verbs does the child know, and how many verbs does the child use, or do they use lots of non-specific, more general verbs to say what they want to say? So of course we need to look for gaps though with other children, and it might be that we do notice that level of talk is not as strong, and all too often we don't want to jump in and just promote the talk. What I actually want to do is I want to think about, well, why is that child's level of talk lower, and what is the first and main gap within their language, and where do I need to focus my efforts in order to build that child's language skill. In the same way as if I want a systematic strategy to build language skills for more than one child, it's not as simplistic as saying, oh, well, I just need a language rich environment and I need to talk and model these things and then I'll hear them back. For some children, that's all you need to do. But for other children, the complexity of what we need to think about is a little bit more detailed. So the general rule of thumb when we're thinking about the language base of writing is that the output of language, the talk, the expressive language, which will eventually feed directly into writing, first and foremost is underpinned by children's ability to listen, understand, and to then store and understand and use vocabulary, and then to link it together into talk. So for many of our children with lower levels of talk, the gap in their language actually begins further to the left of Launchpad. So it might be that I need to spend more time building understanding for the talk to follow, or it might be that I need to spend more time building vocabulary, first of all to understand that vocabulary and later on to use that vocabulary, and that will be the underpinning gap that I need to fill, and then the talk will follow. So when it comes to thinking about having a systematic approach to language to support writing, then we need to kind of think deeper and be more aware of skill flow. We'll touch on this when we talk about different types of play at the end of newsletter 4, and we'll also talk about other aspects of language for higher level writing skills, but I want to just concentrate on the basics first. Okay, thank you for your time.